Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. I see a number of new people here in terms of the people that look like they're signed up for the webinar tonight that are actually showing up here. But I also see a number of familiar faces. I'm always glad to see the familiar faces, and I'm glad that you keep returning so that I can help you find ways to improve your health. The way these webinars work, you create them with your questions. And so none of these webinars is the same. To create your question for me or to give your question to me, there's a chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. Write your question in that. I ask as you write that question, though, that you only hit the enter key one time. If you hit it more than one time, unfortunately, it creates multiple questions on my end. So you're going to need to write your question as one big, long run-on question, which I will then show to everyone on the screen. To those of you that are watching the webinar live, as I talk about a question, I will present it on the screen. You'll actually be able to see it on your screen. To those of you that are listening to recording, either as a video recording or listening to a podcast recording of this, you will not be able to see those questions, obviously. And so I will be reading the questions out loud for everyone to hear as well, too. Tomorrow morning, you will get an email from me. And that email will have a recording of the webinar. So yes, I am recording the webinar as I do every week. And I try to have that ready for you first thing in the morning. Sometimes due to technical problems, that doesn't take place. But generally, it works out okay. So look for that email in the morning. And through that email, you'll also be able to sign up for next week if you have not done so already. So this is the beginning of our February series. And I'll be doing 3 different webinars in a row. Each of the next following Wednesdays. Tonight, unfortunately, I'm going to only be able to be with you for an hour. I have some other engagements that I need to get to, and I was part of the reason I need to do that too is I actually just got back from a medical education conference last night, and so need to deal with some things to catch up here in my practice for having been gone for the last week, learning some new things, which we might hear about tonight, depending on where your questions go too. Okay, so without any further ado, I'd like to go ahead and get started here. And I'm going to go ahead and show the first question. So let me see what we got here. Hello, Linda. Let's see. What are your thoughts about the use of roxithromycin in the treatment of Lyme? I understand that while not approved by the FDA, it's being used in other countries for its good blood-brain barrier penetration. I know several people have obtained this medication while traveling abroad. So, Linda, as you noted, this is a medicine that is not available here in the States. It is part of a family that are called the macrolide antibiotics, and the common 2 ones that we use here in the States, but also are available across the world. One is Zithromax, also known as azithromycin, and the other common one that I use a lot of is something called clarithromycin, also known as Biaxin. Now, any one of the macrolides actually does have the ability to cross the brain. So I do want to let you know that. Of the macrolides, Zithromax would be the weakest. But Biaxin actually is fairly strong, and I believe actually, as I see in my practice, does have good blood-brain barrier penetration, all right? So, and maybe the roxithromycin has better, I have no idea because I don't get to use it in clinical settings, okay? So I know what science can tell us, but what really tells us something is what happens to you, the patient, when we wind up using these medications. Generally, I am pleased with the effects of Biaxin. If the roxithromycin ever gets approved here in the States, I'll be glad to try it out. I have had one of my European patients actually that was able to obtain it. We had good success, but I can't say that it was any more successful than any of the other oral prescriptive antibiotic regimens that I might recommend for my patients, all right? So I wish I had greater information for you, but the information I generally share here is what I try on my patients and what I see actually works, okay? So studies don't always tell us what actually really works in a person that I see in my practice here in the real world, okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Linda, and good luck to you. So let me go ahead. I'm just getting rid of the question from my side so I can get ready to post another one up here. And this next question is from Hem. Hello, Hem. Let's see, I'm treating Lyme with multiple antibiotics for a year and a half, and every time I stop antibiotics or take Tindamax, Lyme symptoms return. As soon as I start other antibiotics, they subside. Is it because the Lyme is hiding? Will it ever be able to stop? Will I ever be able to stop antibiotics? So, Hem, that's actually kind of a complicated question because there's many parts to it. I'll try to answer it as best I can. But for your particular situation, to give you the best answer, it actually would need to be able to do a one-on-one conversation with you. And and as many of you know, there is the possibility of doing that through something we call the one-to-one medical consult that you can find at our main website, the www.treatlyme.net site, treatlyme.net. And on the left-hand navigation menu at the bottom, there is a tab called Consults where you can sign up to actually do internet visits with me or video Skype visits with me, okay? But, so just a few comments. Number one, if you get worse on Tindamax, it might not be that it's not working. It might be that what it's doing is what we want it to do, which is Tindamax is a very useful antibiotic to treat the cyst form of the Lyme. And according to Petri dish experiments, it actually seems to do a good job of getting rid of biofilm, okay? So Tindamax is good at getting at what I would call treatment-resistant Lyme because it's good at getting at two of the more difficult to treat forms, and that is the cyst form of the Lyme germ and biofilms, all right? So Lyme, as many of you know, lives in you in 3 states. It lives as something called a spirochete. That's that corkscrew-looking thing that many of you are aware of. You can find pictures easily on the internet for that. The other way that it lives in you is in a microscopic cyst form called the cyst, all right? And then there's a third form where it lives inside of cells. It actually loses its covering and moves inside cells. We call that intracellular Lyme. Some people call it pleomorphic Lyme. Some people call it L-form Lyme. But basically, it's Lyme that moves inside of your cells. And then Lyme has the ability to cover itself in a layer of slime called a biofilm. And that biofilm is actually a complex structure. It has slime, and then it has a protein that holds that slime together, kind of a protein skeleton. And that's made up of a protein found in our blood clotting protein, actually. It's called fibrin, which comes from something called fibrinogen. Also in the biofilm, you have multiple different kinds of bacteria that live in addition to Lyme. And you have a complex communication system that goes on as well, too. There's a researcher named Eva Choppy, that her last name is spelled S-A-P-I, who's been doing some of the most novel research in Lyme in the country. And probably about 4 or 5 years ago, she did some Petri dish experiments where she was modified Petri dish experiments, where she was looking to see what agents worked the best and also what would get rid of biofilms. And what she found out is that all prescriptive antibiotics do have the ability to get rid of biofilm. It's just to different degrees. So any antibiotic actually can break down biofilm. It's just different degrees. The Tindamax appears to have one of the better abilities, and on her Petri dish experiments was able to break down 95% of the biofilm. So that's pretty good. The only thing that she showed on Petri dish experiments that did better were the 2 herbs that I like to use together. Their products are called Banderol Cemento, which is, Cemento is cat's claw, and Banderol is an extract from a tree called the Atoba tree. These herbs come to us out of the Cowden Protocol. It's the only part of the Cowden Protocol I actually like, which is those 2 herbs, because they work. And if you use the 2 together, I find they help people about 85 to 90% of the time. And when I like to use them especially is in somebody that's getting into treatment-resistant Lyme, where the ordinary antibiotics are not working. It seems Banderol Cemento has the ability to do that. So Hem, that might be one thing for you to consider, is doing a Banderol Cemento. But also realize one of the reasons your Lyme may not be going away, based on what the Tindamax may be telling us here, your reaction to Tindamax, is maybe you've got a lot of Lyme that's built up into cyst and biofilm communities, and you probably ought to be doing some things for that, okay? Now, to answer your question more broadly, why do people not get better? That's probably a better way of looking at your question. Well, there's a number of things that can actually block a person's treatment, okay? One of those is biofilms. And if you're not getting better, you should try to do some targeted treatment for biofilms. Well, what are they? Well, Tindamax is one. Another possibility is using Banderol Cemento. work up to 30 drops twice a day on that because it removes biofilms. Another way of getting at biofilms is to break down the protein skeleton. And what I like to do that is an enzyme called lumbrokinase. It's a group of enzymes that come from earthworms. It comes as a 20 milligram pill, and you would want to do one pill twice a day. I will tell you, there's no research that says that it works, but what I see is it works. People get severe die-off reactions often on it. Now, Eva Choppy has had some new research that came out that is suggesting that if we use the plant Stevia, and that's Stevia, that it also can break down biofilms. I need to review her research a little bit more closely because I'm not sure if I see how it actually works in a live human. I know on a petri dish she's done some experiments, and I have to look because I believe she may even have a more recent research where she's done it in a living, in some type of a living organism. I have to look and see what it is. But presumably what happens with Stevia is it's a plant sweetener, is these biofilms have tubes that bring nutrition in and bring antibiotics in, okay? And what she's shown that I have seen the one experiment of is she's been able to show that when they're exposed to, when biofilms are exposed to Stevia, it keeps those tubes open, which makes it better for the antibiotics to get in. And that's the mechanism by which it might work. The trouble is what happens on a petri dish isn't necessarily what happens in us. And I have a hard time understanding how Stevia can get well absorbed into our bloodstream to work, okay? But I know some of my colleagues are starting to experiment with Stevia. I haven't yet, so I can't report back to you whether it actually has any meaningful use or not. And I need to look, I think she may have a more recent study that I haven't looked at yet that I need to look at a little bit more. So number one, deal with biofilms, okay? Another reason that your treatment could be blocked is if you have co-infections and they're not being handled. So if you have a Bartonella or a Babesia and they're not being treated, that's going to make it so you can't get well. So you should look to make sure you don't have Bartonella or Babesia. You can go to articles that I've written about how to diagnose Bartonella and Babesia, see if you might have them active. Third reason that people sometimes don't get well is if they've developed too many too many yeast in the intestines from being on all these antibiotics, okay? Although that doesn't quite sound like your situation, but it's a reason. Fourth reason sometimes people don't get well is they have other active infections going on, like chronic virus infections, okay? And so there's steps that I have written about how to do that. I'm going to show you where you can go look at all this information in a minute. Another reason people may not get well is they may have heavy metal toxicity or other types of toxins that are keeping their immune systems from working well enough to step in once the antibiotics are done, okay? So you should make sure how your detox systems are working. And you might even want to do studies to look for heavy metal toxicity or to see if you have another type of detox problem called MTHFR detox problem, okay? So these are just a number of things for you to consider. There's a lot of things going on that could be blocking your treatment, making it so that your immune system and other parts of you are not helping to get your germs out. So let me go ahead and show you where you can read more about this, okay? So I'm going to do a screen share here. Let's see what we got here. That did not work. Let me go back here again and do that. Sorry about that. That screen share did not happen, it looks like. There we are. Okay, so this is, I'm at our main website, treatlyme.net. And for instance, here's an article that I've written on kills viruses, a brief guide, because viruses, chronic virus infections could be blocking your treatment, all right? So go to the table of contents here on the left-hand navigation menu of the Treat Lyme book. And you can use this to find answers to most of your questions, okay? So I have a whole chapter devoted to why you can't get better. It's called Can't Get Better, ? Do this. All right, and so you would look here. And in the opening, I have a whole discussion here about why you might not be getting better. And I talk about looking at detox treatments, biofilm treatments, chronic viral infection treatments. Look at whether you have functioning mitochondria. Your energy factories sometimes can get injured here. Also look to make sure you've dealt with your co-infections, as I was just indicating. Sometimes people don't get well because their immune system actually starts attacking them. And one way to treat that is to do something called low-dose naltrexone. And then finally, I talk about yeast here, all right? So where do you, so anyhow, here's articles that you can look at to get ideas. The main place to start though is take a look at this article called Treatment Stuck. Try these steps at 6 months and beyond, okay? It kind of gives you the framework of how you might want to start looking at what to do next in terms of why you might not be getting better, all right? So this is all within the Treat Lyme book. For those of you that have subscribed, you can see everything. If you haven't subscribed, you're not going to be able to read every article without subscribing. But I would encourage you to subscribe so that you can get all this useful information. All right, let me go back here. All right, Ham. So Ham, I hope that gives you some useful things to take a look at, okay? In terms of where to find information about how you figure out if you have Bartonella or Babesia, basically, I believe the best way to diagnose Bartonella Babesia is by your clinical symptoms. And the reason I don't rely on testing is we have too many strains of each of those, all right? So for instance, Bartonella, we estimate 30 strains, but we really can only test well for maybe 2 of them. And for Babesia, we estimate 15 to 20 strains, and we can only do decent testing for 2 of them, all right? So testing is not that useful. You got to look at your symptoms to find out if you have. Take a look at the symptoms that I have. You can look in our chapter called How to Diagnose, and there's an article in there called It Could Be Bartonella or Babesia, the Signs and Symptoms. Look at that. I walk you through the considerations to figure out if you might have Bartonella or Babesia based on your symptoms. And if you do, they need to be treated. Otherwise, you're just not going to get over things, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Ham. All right, let's see here. Let me get rid of Ham's question on my side of the screen. Let's go to Brenda's question. Hello, Brenda. Just shift here, everyone. All right, let's see here. Thank you, Dr. Ross. You're welcome. Can you please go back over your exact recipe for leaky gut? I am taking quercetin, slippery elm, aloe vera, and nystatin. How much should I take of each, and do I need to add anything? Okay, so leaky gut, everyone. Let me talk about what it is. And Brenda, I have an article on leaky gut, but I just got back from a conference. And so I have some new ideas that I'm going to need to add into that article. And believe me, I'm still recovering. I landed last night at about 11 o'clock, so I haven't had a chance to change anything on any of my written information. But the conference was through a group called the Institute for Functional Medicine. The conference actually was on the immune system, of which part of this was looking at leaky gut syndrome, okay? So let's talk about what leaky gut syndrome is, everyone. So leaky gut syndrome happens in your intestines. That's why it's called gut, okay? And to describe what it is, I just want to describe the intestines. And this is one of those things I wish I had a board that I could hold up that has a drawing on it. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to describe it. Actually, I'm going to hold up a picture. Hold on, let me just do something here real quick. I can draw out what I want to show you real fast. Bear with me here, everyone. I'm just doing a quick drawing. So I'm actually going to describe this to you the way that I describe it to my patients when they're here in the office. All right, let's see. I'll have to see if this shows up okay. Yeah, that shows up. Okay, so this is the intestinal tract. Now let me describe what this is, okay? So this area right in here, this is the inside of the intestines. This is where your poop is, basically, okay? These are cells. That one's a cell, that's a cell, that's a cell. And then this is your bloodstream. This is blood vessel, okay? So what separates your poop, literally your poop, from your blood system is one layer of cells, all right? And on this side, this is a healthy intestine right here, all right? Now, what separates, all right, so between these cells and your bloodstream is a bunch of immune cells. And in fact, the largest part of your immune system is the gut. 60% of your immune system is found in the intestines. That's a lot, okay? So this is the biggest part of your immune system, all right? Now, the way that things get from here into here is they get absorbed. They get taken up inside of these cells, all right? And it's only small parts that get absorbed. So proteins that are broken down into their parts called amino acids get absorbed. Small pieces of fat. Anything we need that's in small particles gets taken in, okay? And from here, it gets passed through this immune system and into your bloodstream. But these cells act as filters. They only let in what we need. They let in things that should not inflame the immune system here, okay? Now, what happens is if we get too many yeast living on these cells, or if we get parasites living on these cells, or if we get damage because of poor diet to the mucus covering, a slime layer that protects this, okay? Or if we drink too much alcohol, or if we smoke, or if we have stress, this covering can get damaged. And what happens is these cells then plump up and pull apart. All right, that's what that's supposed to say. All right, so now we got gaps. And what happens is stuff here doesn't necessarily get into your bloodstream anymore by going into the cells. Actually, it just kind of leaks through. So now we get big pieces of gluten and wheat, okay? Or we get pieces of fat, or we get pieces of fruit. We get things that we shouldn't be even getting through in big particles. They get through, and what do they hit? They hit all these immune cells, all right? And as they hit those immune cells, they inflame them. And those immune cells release inflammatory chemicals like cytokines. And many of you know I talk about cytokines all the time. It's the main reason you don't feel well in Lyme disease. But also you get histamines released, okay? And so all of those chemicals get into your bloodstream and they float throughout your body and they make you feel bad all over, okay? That's what leaky gut syndrome is, all right? So to get rid of leaky gut, you've got to create a good balance between bacteria and yeast again in the intestines, right? So all of us have bacteria that live in our intestines on those cells and also yeast. And they keep each other under control so that they don't cause plumping up and pulling apart of those cells. But when we're on antibiotics, often we grow too many yeast. So one of the things I always like to do in treating leaky gut is putting good bacteria back in to compete with the yeast. So first thing you want to do is make sure you're on a good probiotic, and you want to take about 50 to 100 billion cultures. My favorite probiotic, there's two. One is a soil-based probiotic called Prescripticus Pro. It's made of bacteria from the dirt, the ground, okay? The other one is to use a product called HMF Forte, which has lactobacillus in it, and also has a bifidobacterium in it. And those bacteria are great at also repopulating the intestines and decreasing inflammation, okay? And for people that have bad leaky gut, what I like to do now is to combine my HMF Forte along with the Prescripticus Pro, which is the dirt-based probiotics, okay? All right, so put good probiotics in. Don't throw your money away on most of the garbage you buy at health food stores, by the way, with probiotics. You get what you pay for. There are good studies that show that most of those products out there do not repopulate your intestines, and there's only a few brands that actually do. The Prescripticus Pro does that I recommend, and this HMF Forte is another brand that does too, okay? All right. Sometimes for leaky gut, it is also useful to put in a good healthy yeast, which is something called Saccharomyces boulardii, which is known as Sacro B, okay? And for bad leaky gut, I will also add that in, and that's 2 pills 1 time a day. And I like using a Thorne product called Sacro B, all right? So first thing, put good germs in, all right? Number 2, kill your yeast if they're there. And as many of you know, I have good guidelines that show you how to do that within the Treat Lyme book. The other thing is if you happen to have parasites, get rid of your parasites. So you got to get rid of the infection too, okay? All right, second thing you need to do, another thing that is useful is to actually build up that mucus layer, is to take vitamin A. And this is a new thing. I just learned this, okay? And that is vitamin A is great for helping support that slime layer that protects those cells. And you want to take 10,000 international units. Now, vitamin A gets a bad rap. I mean, we're taught it can cause toxicity in developing babies, etc., but not at 10,000 international units. That is a safe level for people to take even if they're pregnant, okay? So vitamin A, 10,000 international units. The other thing that is helpful to help support that layer also is to be on adequate doses of vitamin D, and I like to have people take anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 units, all right? So be on vitamin A, be on vitamin D, all right? The other thing that can help is to be on what are called prebiotics, okay? Sacro B you could actually call prebiotic. Vitamin A you could call a prebiotic. Vitamin D you can call a prebiotic. But some people that are having a really hard time, we might want to look at using something called fructose oligosaccharides, which is FOS. You're not going to want to use that, though, if you have small intestine bowel overgrowth with yeast in your small intestines, okay? So a lot of probiotics will come with FOS in them. That's a prebiotic. There's another prebiotic that sometimes products will come with called inulin is another prebiotic. Prescript Assist Pro that I like to use from Research Nutritionals has a soil-based enzymes that actually serve as a prebiotic as well too, okay? So in terms of recreating that barrier, you've got to kill yeast and parasites that's there. You got to put good germs in, and you need to be on vitamin A and vitamin D. All right. Other things that you can do is to give a good fuel source for the cells to heal. And that fuel source is something called L-glutamine, also known as L-glutamine powder. It's an amino acid. It's the main fuel source for your cells. And a good way to use L-glutamine is to take it as a 3 gram to a 4 gram scoop and take it as 12 grams a day, usually divided into 3 separate doses, okay? And there's a good Thorne product for that I like to use, all right? So those are some of the stronger ways I like to do. And if that's not effective enough, I may sometimes try to create that slime layer by using slippery elm, mallow. Those are some herbs that you can use. Licorice can sometimes help with that as well too. Aloe can help with that. And that I like using as a product called GI NCAP by Thorne. A couple pills 3 times to 4 times a day can help with that. What else? One other thing you can do temporarily while you're trying to heal that lining is to aid with digestion, and that's to use digestive enzymes, a couple pills before meals, okay? The most basic program, though, that I would do is get your germs killed, the yeast and parasites if they're there. Be on vitamin A and be on vitamin D. Those are 2 things I'm going to start getting more aggressive about based on what I learned at this workshop, okay? And then make sure you're on a variety of probiotics. So Prescript Assist Pro, be on your good bifidobacterium, lactobacterium that would come in an HMF forte, for instance, and consider adding Sacro B if you've really got a bad problem with it, okay? All right, so that's a lot. I think I'm going to turn this whole thing into a new video that will be used as my leaky gut syndrome video. I think that turned out pretty well. And yeah, so thank you for that question, Brenda, and good luck to you. Oh, wait, one more thing here. In terms of the ways to treat yeast, let me just go ahead and show you. So I'm going to do a quick screen share here. So I'm back in the Treat Lyme book. In terms of my recommendations about treating yeast if they're there, there's a whole chapter on yeast. You can take a look at it here. And one key thing about your gut is make sure you're not putting a lot of simple sugars in. So everyone, you probably are aware of the diet that I'm recommending for Lyme. And it's in this article. It's called the best brain, inflammation, pain, energy, and detox diet ever. And I actually do mean that. It's a paleo-like diet that's high in fat and builds in some fasting as well too. It's very low in carbs, therefore you're not going to feed your yeast. The other thing is by taking all that sugar out, it also is a low inflammatory too, and the fats that it uses are anti-inflammatory fats. It's great for nerve cell function, and it's great for energy factory function called mitochondria. So take a look at that. That's the key part of any program also to heal your gut, okay? And then there's a article called Kills Yeast, a brief guide here. In terms of parasites, ways that I recommend to look for parasites and to treat parasites, take a look in the infection treatment plans here. And there is an article called Kills Parasites, a brief guide. That'll give you some ideas for that, okay? All right, thanks for that question. Let me go back here. Good luck to you, Brenda. I know that was a little long-winded, but it's actually a little more complex than I used to think. And I think I learned some good ways to kind of boost my treatments for it as well, too, based on this immune workshop that I just got back from. I always like being able to put things in place after I go to one of these conferences and actually learn something. Fortunately, I found out I know a lot already. I didn't really learn that many new things, but I'm going to be able to fine-tune some aspects of my treatments based on the things that I learned at this conference. All right, let's go back here. All right, let's go. Let's see, Debbie. Hi, Debbie. Let's see. Is it okay to use kaopectate to treat diarrhea? Stool, that's perhaps due to side effect of antibiotic treatments. Um, so Debbie, yeah, I think it's okay to use the kaopectate on a short-term basis. However, a lot of the comments that I was just making as it pertains to leaky gut, you should probably try here too. So I would look at doing a mix of probiotics of the HMF Forte variety that I was just talking about, along with a Prescript Assist Pro. But probably with the Prescript Assist Pro, the soil-based probiotics, I would do 4 a day, 1 time a day. The HMF Forte, I would do 4 a day. And I would start some Saccharose B at least 2 a day on that. The other things I would do is to make sure to be on digestive enzymes as well. And you might also have your daughter start on the vitamin A and vitamin D recommendations that I just had as well too. And if the diarrhea really continues over the next month or two, I would look at possibly, over the next couple of weeks or so, you might want to look at starting the recommendations I had on the L-glutamine powder as a fuel source to help those intestinal cells work better and absorb the water in better then too, okay? So I hope that gives you some information to look at, Debbie. Good luck. And tell your daughter I say good luck too. All right. All right. Hello, Nina. Good to see you here. Let's see. Looking forward to hearing about that conference. I guess I've already shared one thing I learned. We'll have to see if there's other things I can share based on what the questions are. All right. All right, let's see here. There is one thing I wanted to share with everyone, and I hope to have it together this weekend. So many of you, and this is not what I learned at the conference. In fact, this was not taught at the conference at all. Many of you may be familiar with a newer treatment that's out called low-dose immunotherapy, or LDI. And I have spoken skeptically of it in the past. It's basically a way of giving you very, very low doses of Lyme germs or Bartonella germs or Babesia germs or yeast germs, coupled with an enzyme called glucuronidase. And my concern in the past is that it is turning down the immune system perhaps too much, and that it might make it so Lyme would grow. Okay, and that still is a valid concern. However, I'm going to be writing an article about it this week, and I suspect the article will be done this weekend because I've been looking at this more. And as a treatment I'm considering, I will be starting to work with a small number of my patients in the next week to actually try it out and see what happens. So let me just talk briefly about it here, but you will see an article over the weekend, I believe. My intention is to put a full article together about this, okay? So let me talk about this thing called low-dose immunotherapy, because it is kind of the treatment of the season. And at first, I was concerned that it could be harmful to people over time, that yes, they might feel better, but my concern is that it was going to allow the germ to grow more and therefore be a problem down the road with people. Okay, so let's talk about this, and then again you'll get more of an article about it. So let's talk about what LDI is first. Okay, so there is, to understand what LDI is, I want to talk about an older type of treatment called enzyme potentiated desensitization. And that started probably about 20 or 30 years ago when a physician in England discovered that if he injected nose polyps with an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, that those polyps would decrease in size. And nose polyps occur when you're allergic to something, okay? So he hypothesized that what was happening is that he was turning down the allergic reaction or the inflammation reaction to it. And so what eventually he was able to see, and what some of the science tells us, is that when you use this enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, it increases a type of white blood cell called a T regulatory cell. T regulatory cells are good cells. They're good guys, okay? And I'm going to say more about that in a minute, all right? Now, if you take that enzyme, beta-glucuronidase, and you couple it with something that somebody is either having a true allergic reaction against or an inflammatory reaction against, like in Lyme, if you couple that beta-glucuronidase with whatever a person is having allergic or inflammation reaction against, what happens is it increases the T regulatory cells against those things. Okay, so we can increase Tregs. That's a good thing, all right? Now, let me talk about something else then. Okay, so there are two types of inflammation that we can have. There is a type of inflammation called Th1 inflammation and another type of inflammation called Th2 inflammation. Th1 inflammation is inflammation created by white blood cells when they try to attack a germ. It's the cytokines I keep talking about, okay? Primarily the cytokines from our immune cells trying to get rid of Lyme. And they make cytokines to help fight the infection, all right? So that's good. We want them to make cytokines to fight infection, but sometimes they make too many, okay? So that's Th1. Th2 inflammation is inflammation that is caused when antibodies go after something, all right? And that also has some cytokines associated with it too. Now, the amount of Th2 inflammation and Th1 inflammation we have is governed by T regulatory cells, all right? And that's what the issue is. Now, for some people with Lyme, the reason they get so sick is that the Th1 just gets too ramped up. Th2 may get too ramped up. So the idea is if we give you the glucuronidase along with proteins of Lyme and proteins of Babesia and proteins of Bartonella, that what we might do is turn on T regulatory cells to turn down all this excess Th1 and Th2 inflammation. Okay, now the concern I've had is if you do that without still killing germs, your germs can still grow too much, okay? So the main proponent of this type of an idea, the guy that has come up with this, and it's only about a year old, is a physician in Alaska named Ty Vincent. And Ty thinks that we don't need to use antibiotics at all. He thinks that Lyme is just an immune system overactivity. And I just flat out disagree with him. So my concern would be if you got LDI without killing your germs. The way I'm going to be experimenting with it on a number of my patients is to go ahead and use it coupled with antibiotics. And I'll be reporting back to you. Anytime that I start a treatment for the first time, I try it on a limited number of people. I don't introduce it to my whole practice. So for those of you that are thinking, I want to go see Marty Ross to get LDI, I probably won't do it for you right now. This will be something that I'll probably be making a more part of my practice if it works and if I find that it's safe, okay? So those are the two things that I want to be clear about. But I am not as much of a skeptic now. I'm not as much of a skeptic if people are still killing their germs at the same time, okay? So you'll see a full article coming out about that this weekend where I may give even more detail than what I just did here. But that is one thing about the immune system, Nina, that I'm going to be doing that is not being taught. It's too new. It's just, there isn't the science to support it yet, even at the Institute for Functional Medicine, okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Nina. All right, let me move on here. Hello, Jen. Let's see. Is Bartonella resistance something I need to be concerned about? I read in a few med journals that there is evidence of rapid resistance when treated with rifampin alone. Right now, I'm on rifampin alone. I'm going to be adding Septra. However, I will have to do it very slowly over a few weeks. Boy, Jen, I haven't seen any evidence of rapid resistance growing to it, and still to this. So first of all, in terms of my treatments for Bartonella, I always recommend that people be on 2 antibiotics at the same time to treat it. 2 Bartonella killing antibiotics. I find that works best, okay? But if they are not going to do 2, then there is a single antibiotic that often works by itself, and that is rifampin. By itself, I find it works by itself maybe about 80% of the time. So I just disagree with these articles are showing because that's not my experience here in the real world, okay? The other antibiotic I sometimes will use by itself is Bactrim, okay? And when you put the 2 together, you get a really good job. So I don't know if I agree with that. It isn't my experience, okay? Having said that, though, again, I find the best treatments for Bartonella that work 95% of the time will use 2 antibiotics, okay? And those treatments will work about 80–85% of the time, any 2 antibiotic combination. Altogether, I believe we can get rid of Bartonella 95% of the time, but it's got to be a 2-agent treatment, okay? And you may have to hunt around until you find the right one that works for your Bartonella. There are herbs that can work too. Houtunia and Sitta acuta are 2 that I will work with, but I only find that they work together about 70–75% of the time. So it's not where I would start, but for my patients that they don't have any other options or they are herb-only people, that their preference is herbs only, I will tell them they can use that, but I give it a 70–75% chance of working. All right, so to look at again, I think you can get rid of Bartonella 95% of the time. Now, online, you read about everyone that has Bartonella failures. But again, on your Lyme boards online, the people that are going to be there are the people probably that have not done well. And unfortunately, in Lyme in general, there's 10% of people we have a hard time helping, okay? And in Bartonella, 5% of people can get into relapse situations. And those probably are the people that you hear a lot of, okay? You're probably not hearing from the people that did well with their treatments. That's just my observation, okay? So let me do a screen share here. I just want to show you one thing. All right, so I'm back in the Lyme book, and I want to go to the chapter called Infection Treatment Plans. And in terms of my ideas for treating Bartonella, here it is. It's called Kills Bartonella, a Brief Guide, okay? Now, the key thing I want to tell you, and this is an agreement I have with Buhner. Buhner is the herbalist that also writes a lot about Bartonella. He contends, and what his treatment is, if you look at his Bartonella treatment herbally, it is complex. But most of what he's doing with his herbs are boosting the immune system. And I agree, you got to boost the immune system. You are not getting rid of Bartonella unless you boost the immune system. And to do that, you need to follow the steps that I outlined in the successful treatment recipe, which basically says get sleep, decrease the cytokines, help your immune system, control hormones, be on a good multivitamin, remove yeast, because these are things that suppress your immune system, okay? And then in addition, I lay out what I consider to be the best treatments. And the best ones are rifampin-based treatments, are in my tier 1. Tier 1 treatments work, again, about, can work up to about 85 to 90% of the time. So I like a rifampin with minocycline, or rifampin with Bactrim, or rifampin with Zithromax combination, okay? There's the fluoroquinolone treatments. Now, these get bad raps because they can give tendinitis, and I agree with that. I tend not to use the fluoroquinolones as much these days. That's Levaquin and Cipro, but they're still valid treatments. The other tier 1 treatments are to use Biaxin, also called clarithromycin, with Bactrim. That can be a good tier 1 treatment, okay? I also lay out some other options here in my tier 2 and my tier 3 treatments, okay? But take a look at that for some ideas about what I think the better ways are to treat Bartonella, all right? All right, thank you, Jen, for that question. And good luck to you. All right, hello, Susie. What is your experience with Lyme disease and facial pain? This has become my most debilitating symptom now. So, so there's different kinds of pain, Susie. And Lyme can give various kinds of pain. And whether it's facial or whether it's an arm or a leg, there's the various ways that it can cause it are either neurologically or by leading to inflammation of the tissues, okay? So neurologic pain would have qualities of sharp, stabbing, shooting, piercing, burning, electrical, or light touch. If you have light touch, it can really just drive you crazy to be touched lightly, okay? That's nerve pain. That's nerve injury pain, okay? The other kind of pain is more of an achy kind of pain, and that's more related to inflammation of the muscles and the tendons and the ligaments. All right, so in terms of the pain, the best way to deal with the kind of inflammatory muscular soft tissue pain I just talked about is to lower your cytokines. And the ways to do that are to be on curcumin. I like that. That is my favorite cytokine reducing herb. It gets inside of white blood cells and blocks the inflammation chemicals called cytokines. And you would take it as 500 milligrams 3 times a day, up to 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. I would also work with glutathione, which helps remove toxins that can trigger those cytokines, okay? And it also works by lowering oxidizing agents that tell white blood cells to make cytokines. All right, and I would take it as, I like the product called Trifortify Orange, 5 milliliters 1 or 2 times a day. Another option is to use the building block for glutathione called N-acetylcysteine, also known as NAC, or you could, which is a product made by Thorne called Cystoplus, 500 milligrams 3 times a day, okay? Those are some steps that I would take in terms of lowering cytokines. In terms of the nerve pain, if this is nerve pain, there are some herbal options, but often what you're going to need to do for nerve pain is you want to repair the nerve injury, okay? And to repair nerve injury, you want to give glutathione. So either the glutathione I just recommended, You also want to give the curcumin that I just talked about. And you want to repair the cell coverings of the nerves. And to do that, you want to give the fats that make up the cell coverings. And that is to use a product called NT Factor, also known as NT Factor Energy. And you would take it as 2 pills 3 times a day for 2 months, and then decrease it to 1 pill 3 times a day for 4 months. Okay. So NT Factor also repairs and rebuilds the energy factories in our cells called mitochondria that also can get damaged. And when they get damaged, they can give you a lot of this achiness as well too. All right, so I'm going to point you to 2 articles that you can come back and look at later that kind of lay this out with a little bit more detail. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and do a screen share here again. All right, so we're back in the Treat Lyme book. All right, so in terms of cytokines and lowering the inflammation in Lyme called cytokines, take a look. Again, everyone should be on this diet that I've talked about. This is the key Lyme diet as far as I'm concerned these days for most people. Now, no diet is for everyone, and I know some people can't tolerate this, but take a look at it. I talked about it earlier, all right? Also, take a look at this article called Herxheimer-Dioff Reaction, Inflammation Run Amok. It does talk about Herxheimer reactions, but in Herxheimer reactions, what happens is you make too many cytokines. So this is actually an article about cytokines and why you should lower them and how you lower them, okay? So here's curcumin, be on a good multivitamin. I talk about glutathione here, and I talk about some other ways, including the N-acetylcysteine that I just talked about, okay? All right, so take a look at that article. Let me see, what is the other thing we wanted to look? Oh, nerve repair. In terms of nerve repair, go to the article called the chapter called Brain and Nerves, and you would want to look at this article called Neuropathy Repair, Heal That Tingling, Numbness, and Pain. And that will give you a lot of insights that I just talked about here as well, too. Okay? All right, let me go back here again. All right, Susie, good luck to you, and I hope that gives you some useful information to work with here. All right, so while I'm getting rid of Susie's question, I'm going to just say one thing. So I should have mentioned tonight, I should go back to the beginning. The reason you feel bad in Lyme disease is your immune system is making too many cytokines. And in fact, when we say somebody has Lyme disease, what they really have is an excess cytokine syndrome, excess inflammation, okay? So cytokines are good and bad. They're made by white blood cells. When a white blood cell sees a germ, they're made to help the immune system work better. They recruit white blood cells to where that germ is. They turn the white blood cells on to kill that germ. And they also help to create more white blood cells. That's all good. But immune system doesn't do a good job getting rid of Lyme, but it tries harder and harder, and eventually it makes too many cytokines, okay? And it's too many cytokines that give you all of the Lyme disease symptoms. In fact, it's kind of really a misnomer. It's a misstatement to say somebody has Lyme symptoms. What they really have are excess cytokine symptoms, okay? So that's why I build into all of my treatments. If you look at the Lyme disease treatment guidelines we have on at treatlyme.net, you will see we say lower cytokines, use curcumin in everyone, okay? All right, let's move on here. Hello, Josephine. Let's see. Hi again, Dr. Ross. Have you seen the new study done by Eva Choppy and others about stevia as a treatment for Lyme? I see that Nutrionetics brands was the most effective one they tried. Would it be okay to take increasing droplet of this until I herx? Okay, so Josephine, I was just talking about that earlier tonight. I haven't seen Eva's newest article, but I understand it's out there as I was talking with some colleagues about it this week. So, I don't know what's the best form of stevia. Eva gets some of her research, like her research to look at Banderol Cemento was funded by Nutrionetics, okay? And so, yeah, she tried the Nutrionetics product because they funded the research. Now, I think Eva is a great person, okay? But anytime that you have research funded by somebody, it may skew your results just a little bit, okay? I would just point that out, all right? So as I said earlier tonight in one of the earlier questions, I still am a bit skeptical about this stevia, given I don't understand how it's going to work once it gets absorbed. And so anyhow, those are my comments. In terms of should you herx enough, should you take enough till you herx? Well, it depends if biofilms are really your problem. They do occur in everyone, but it doesn't mean they're blocking your treatment. So, if you keep going up on stevia and you're getting no results, it just may mean, number one, it's not working in you, all right? Or that biofilms aren't part of your problem. Maybe your antibiotics do get through your biofilms okay? Remember, as I said earlier tonight, Eva's earlier experiments show that certain antibiotics can remove part of the biofilm. They all do to a degree. So if you've been on antibiotics or you've been on a Banderol Cemento, you've already done biofilm work. Her work would suggest maybe we can do a little bit better with Stevia. Again, I need to read it in more detail. But again, I'm a little skeptical. I always am skeptical. I'm a skeptic when it comes to any of this. I like to see how it works in my patients, and I haven't started using Stevia yet because I think there's better ways. I think there's Banderol Cemento that gets rid of 100% of biofilm on Petri dishes, for instance, okay? And I like lumber kinase as well, too. And I like tinidazole, which she showed from her earlier research. But I'll get back to you on this one after I have a better chance to actually look at her most recent article. All right. Thanks, Josephine. And good luck to you. Hello, Janice. So what did I learn at the conference this last week? Well, number one, I talked about how to get at leaky gut a little bit better. Okay. Number two, I learned, gosh, I don't know if I can quite answer it this way. I think you'll see as I answer certain questions, because there may be ideas that I insert. One thing I guess I would say is one thing I'm going to start trying to do more with my patients is using fish oil. The essential fatty acids in fish oil can be quite useful in terms of regulating all of this extra inflammation that we see in Lyme, okay? And so I'm probably going to be starting people taking at least 1.5 grams a day of fish oil that is mercury-free. You want to have mercury-free fish oil. And those essential fatty acids that are in there, which are primarily EPA and DHEA. Fish oil is high in EPA rather than DHA. Most of us have excess DHA. We want to have more EPA oil, which you get in fish oil, okay? But the omega-3s, I think, are just probably something I'm going to be adding into my treatments. I talked to you earlier about probably how I'm going to be a little bit differently and act a little differently in terms of how aggressive I go after leaky gut syndrome here in the future. And I think I'm going to be a bit more aggressive about using probably 2 probiotics at a time to do the dirt probiotics along with the HMF Forte type probiotics, at kind of keeping that gut calmed down so that we don't have as much of inflammation. The other thing is an offshoot out of that is, again, I left with more of an impression about the power of all this dysfunctional inflammation, especially the Th1 inflammation I described earlier. And so in addition to using the herbs that I like to use in diet that I am recommending for people, I feel very strong about doing that. In addition to the curcumin, in addition to working with fish oil, in addition to keeping the gut inflammation under control, I am going to be adding in vitamin D a bit more and vitamin A, I believe, a lot more. And I described that earlier tonight because they also help keep inflammation down. And then finally, in people where I think the inflammation, this Th1 inflammation, is just totally out of whack, I am going to be considering doing this, the LDI that I was mentioning earlier, which was not taught this weekend, was not even discussed, but I was left with such a greater appreciation of what all this inflammation mess is that I might start looking at regulating it that way too. Okay, so those are just some thoughts that I have, Janice. Now, I want to be clear with everyone. I am not necessarily endorsing LDI yet. I said I'm at a point I want to try it out, given what the theory is about how it's going to work. And I've got some people that that I've been talking with about that, probably about 5 people here initially in the next month that I'm going to be getting going on this. And we'll have to see over months. I'll probably be adding other people in over time as well, too. All right. All right, let's see here. This is from Brenda. We talked about that earlier. All right, Brenda, I'm not sure why that's still showing up here. Let's see. All right, next question is from Heather. Hi, Heather. Let's see, I ordered the IGeneX test kit and was told to draw blood on Monday morning and mail it immediately. My doctor held my blood for 4 days before mailing it. Rats. So it may still be effective, but the freshest blood is the best. And so that seems to be a little bit long. I would probably reconsider doing that again. That's what I would recommend. Anyhow, sorry about that. All right, let's see here. Hello, Paula. Let's see. I'm being treated for a Lyme relapse currently. My symptoms are very neuro, buzzing, head vibrations while falling asleep, head pressure, ear ringing. I tried lithium orotate last week, and it scared me because my head vibrations seemed to get worse that night. So Paula, I'm not sure why that happened. That's not supposed to happen. So I'll say that to you. You know, there's a saying that I have in Lyme disease, and this actually not just in Lyme disease, this is any medical condition. So my saying is this, and that is that anything can happen to anyone with anything. And what that means is there are adverse reactions we can have to anything that might not be common. And the reason it can happen is our genetic makeup and our expression of those genes and how our genetic materials interact with toxins from the environment and bacteria of the environment makes us all very unique in terms of our chemical processes and chemical reactions, okay? So obviously this is not something you should do. You reacted poorly to it, okay? So some other things that you might want to consider to kind of calm that agitated nervous system down. Number one, given how agitated it is, I would consider treating Bartonella with you, or at least I would try to consider if you have Bartonella. And again, if you want to see if you have other things that suggest Bartonella, take a look at the article I have on how to diagnose Bartonella. You'll find it in the How to Diagnose chapter, okay? The other thing you can use to calm that agitated nervous system from a herbal medicine standpoint is to start the herb or the supplement called L-theanine, and that's L-theanine, Theanine. Theanine is a component of green tea, and it's converted in the brain into a chemical called GABA. And our brain is full of GABA receptors. GABA on a GABA receptor calms things down, okay? And you can do it as 100 milligrams, and you can take anywhere from 100 milligrams 3 times a day up to 400 milligrams 300 times a day. Don't go over 1,200 milligrams, okay? But you could do it that way. That might be something for you to consider. But again, consider treating Bartonella if you're not doing that already, or at least investigate based on your symptoms whether you might have Bartonella there, okay? Good luck to you, Paula. All right, let's see here. Hello, Gloria. Let's see. Thanks again for your efforts bringing us together. I've heard that Rife machine might have some good use with Lyme. What do you think? So Rife machines, everyone, I usually, here in the United States, the Food and Drug Administration looks very unfavorably at physicians that recommend Rife machines. So I can't give a formal recommendation, but I can talk about what I see, okay? So this is not a formal recommendation so that I don't run afoul of anybody in the FDA that might be listening in on this, okay? But let's talk about how it's proposed to work. So, and which I think is a sound theory and I think probably does work, but I can't recommend it because the FDA will come in and has been known to lock up my colleagues for recommending it, all right? So what a Rife machine does is it generates an electromagnetic frequency. And there are certain frequencies that we use that resonate with the covering of germs in a way that burst that germ covering because it vibrates, okay? So it's much like if you took a singer and put them in front of a glass of water, they could sing at a frequency that resonates with that glass so that it burst the covering on the glass, okay? All right, and the Rife machine can do that, all right? Now, there is a person that's done a lot of writing about Rife. His name is Brian Rosner. It's B-R-Y-A-N, last name Rosner, R-O-S-N-E-R. If you Google his name along with Rife, you will be led to a book he's written about Rife. I think it's a great source about how to Rife. I think he's got some wrong theories about antibiotics in there, and he and I have had discussions about that. I run into him frequently, or we have had other conversations before. But Brian believes that he actually cured himself of Lyme by using Rife, okay? Now, what do I see in my practice? Well, people that Rife, I think, get benefit about 60% of the time. That means it doesn't work at all 40% of the time. And what I just said, benefit, is it helps. I don't think it gets rid of Lyme in most people. And the reason is that the mechanism by which it works, it probably will treat the spirochete form of the Lyme because that's what has a coat on it. It may get at the cyst form, but it's hard to tell. But it's not going to do anything probably about intracellular Lyme because the form of Lyme that lives inside of cells doesn't have a coat. So there's nothing for it to vibrate with, okay? So if people choose to Rife in my practice because they want to, and even if and I don't recommend it because I can't recommend Rifing according to the FDA. If they choose to Rife, usually what I'm going to suggest they do is be on either herbs or prescriptions that will treat intracellular Lyme. The drugs that do that are Biaxin, called clarithromycin, also Zithromax, doxycycline, tetracycline. Those are intracellular. Or you could look at doing a Banderol Cemento and then layering your Rife on top of it, okay? So anyhow, look at Rosner's book. It's a good how-to book about Rifing. If you are going to Rife, as I've studied Rifing, I think the best machine to get is something that's designed on a model called the Doug coil. There's different ways to build Rifes, but the one that is designed on a Doug coil, I think, is probably going to be your stronger way of going, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Gloria. All right. I'm going to take one more question here, everyone. I told you tonight earlier that I was only going to be able to do this for about an hour tonight because I have some other life obligations given that I was gone last week. The big one being I got to go rescue my dog from the kennel about an hour away from here. So if you notice Halo and Thor are not hopping around tonight, it's because they have been at dog camp for the week and I got to go find them. And I look forward to getting them back too, by the way. So everyone, let's see. So hi, Pia. Let's see, participating from Denmark, where it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeeks. I appreciate that you're here. Thank you for doing so much for it. You're welcome. Do you have any thoughts about a rotten smell from the skin? It worsens during hercs and in electromagnetic radiations. Sometimes a rash with the same smell. Yeah, so the way that we get toxins out, so Pia, it likely is a smell of detox, okay, or toxins coming out through your skin. So to understand it, let me explain a little bit how detox works. So the way that we get fat-based toxins out of us, like Lyme toxins or chemical toxins, or toxins that our own chemical reactions make in our body, just as breakdown products, anything that's a fat-based toxin goes to the liver, and it gets transformed in the liver from a fat-based toxin, and it's supposed to get turned into a fat-based toxin. And from there, it gets changed from a fat-based toxin into a water-based toxin, that is. And from there, it gets moved out into the intestines, and because it's water-based, it gets mixed in our poop, and we poop it out. Okay? Now, if the liver is not able to detox correctly, if it can't take those fat-based toxins and move them into water-based toxins adequately, either not enough or at all, the other way that we get toxins out of us is we can sweat them out. And so you get it through the skin then, basically, okay? So you may want to help support your detox mechanisms in your liver. And you may also want to work to bind up toxins in the intestines so that they don't get reabsorbed. So for instance, if your liver is not able to return those water-based toxins adequately fat-based toxins into water-based toxins, some of those will go out into the liver as a fat-based toxin and they can get reabsorbed then, all right? And in fact, 25% of people in Lyme have a genetic programming where they can't remove their Lyme toxins. They're programmed in a way they can't get them out. So those Lyme toxins, which are fat-based, go to the liver, come out fat-based, go out into the intestines, and they get reabsorbed again, okay? So 2 things. Number 1, support your liver. And the best way to do that is to either be on glutathione, and I would try to do 500 milligrams 1 time a day, or the other way to raise glutathione in the liver is to take something called N-acetylcysteine, 500 milligrams 3 times a day, all right? The other thing that you ought to look at doing is to make sure you're having bowel movements at least 1 or 2 times a day and add enough magnesium into your diet to cause you to have bowel movements to do that. So you poop those toxins out. And then the third thing is to bind those toxins up. And what can act as a good toxin binder is to be on soluble fiber. And a good soluble fiber is something called modified citrus pectin, also called fractionated pectin powder. And you would want to do a scoop of it 3 times a day. To give you an idea, if you were to Google a product made, just Google Thorn, which is a manufacturer of good products, and there's a product called fractionated pectin. Actually, I'll show you it here. Let me do a screen share. Okay, so I'm in this is the supplement store that our patients get their supplements from. Basically, we've looked for the highest quality supplements and we've put them here. These are the ones we think give you the best chance of working, and they don't contain, we try to find supplements that don't contain artificial ingredients that are going to hurt you, okay? So this is what we carry, all right? So, and anyone can buy here. But if you're looking for this one product, I'm just going to show you it. Let's see here. Citrus. And let's see if that comes up. Nope, that did not work. All right, let's try this way. There it is. Okay, so this is a product made by Thorne called fractionated pectin powder, okay? This is a soluble fiber, and if you were to do 1 scoop 1 to 3 times a day, it will bind those toxins up in your intestines that are fat-based and pull them out so that they don't get reabsorbed again, okay? All right, let me go back here. All right, so good luck to you, Pia. I'm glad you joined us from Denmark, and good luck. So listen, everyone, that's it for me tonight. Again, I've got to go rescue 2 dogs that are ready to come home before the kennel master won't let me get them. They actually go out into the country. They get to run around while I'm gone, so I treat them fairly well. Anyhow, next week we will spend an hour and a half together. And tomorrow morning, you should get an email from me if everything goes okay with the video production tonight. That will have a link to the recording of tonight's webinar. I don't think I'm going to have any podcasts ready here for about another week or 2 of any of these webinars, but that still is on the agenda. I want to turn these all into podcasts so you can listen to them. And I also hope that you will sign up for next week's webinar. Now, in a second here, I'm going to take you over to treatlyme.net. When you get there, you can go ahead and sign up for the Treat Lyme book, okay? So for those of you that have not done so yet, subscribe. You're going to get a lot of great information in there. The same kind of way I explain things here in the webinars, they are written about in those articles. There are some that need a little bit of updating here based on this recent workshop, which I will be doing. But take a look there. And also, you could click on the link to the webinars also when I take you there to sign up for next week's webinar, all right? Good night, everyone. It's been good to be with you, and good luck.